Good morning. Welcome to the Vault of Liz Dance. My name is Liz, and I am so excited to have you with me again. If you watched part one of us investigating the anti-marriage stance, I am glad to have you with me yet again. If you're new here, oh my god, I recently uploaded, recorded, put up a video investigating anti-marriage stance with two prompts. And the first prompt was marriage is a patriarchal institution that should be abolished, and the second one was marriage is a form of legalized sex work. And the second one was so spicy, but it was an opportunity to really dive deep in, is there a truth that this prompt is asking us to come to terms with, even when it's so uncomfortable, you know what I'm saying? And what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on those first two prompts? If you haven't watched the video is up, or you can watch that immediately after this one. But on today's episode, we are going to be going forward with this investigation, with I think two, three, four more prompts. And are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? First of all, I love my shirt. This is me trying to like it. Like the other video, invite a sense of open-mindedness. Do tell me your thoughts. Do tell me where you stand in this institution. And, without further ado, let's just get straight into it. So for today's episode, we are continuing the second part of the last prompt in the previous video, right? So the full prompt was marriage is a form of legalized sex work and slavery. And we covered marriage is a form of legalized sex work. And for today, we're starting off with marriage is a form of legalized slavery. So this sentiment is based on the subjugation that women undergo in their households, drawing parallels to slavery or slave-like conditions. So when we look at something like the uncompensated domestic and reproductive labor that women do in the households. And so first of all, I have seen this sentiment and this statement floating around so much, and it's like it's only through marriage where even the poorest man is assured of getting a slave. It is like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But I agree so much that in marriages, men in the capitalist economy do get free, permanent labor. I think that's true. When we find women doing so much of the domestic care work in the home, the cooking, the cleaning, the childbearing, and the child rearing, all without wages, all without, hours, all without, labor protections, like the aspects that you would see in a great job, that this free labor that is uncompensated is a form of, I think, economic exploitation, and hence people compare it with you just working like a slave. I mean, you're not getting paid. You don't have any protections. You also don't get to clock out on this. So I don't. And then also the fact of using physical and sexual violence for compliance or as a form of punishment, right? So like for a long time, the law did not have any consequences for when men hit women or any physical violence in the home, right? It was seen as a form of punishment, which was like okay, because again, women are seen as property in that. And of course, even the law did not permit for wives to charge their husbands with rape. There are no marital rape laws in so many countries all over the world. There was an allowance of the elements of physical violence and sexual violence, right? So any system that allows for dominance and a push for compliance through physical violence, right, and sexual violence really does mirror the mechanics of what slavery was, right? The aspects, right, of marriage that are similar to what slavery is. And it's true statement that sometimes it does feel like slave work because you get to take on so much of this house without pay. And the worst part is there is no also recognition. But also looking at the analogy of equating marriage with slavery feels a little bit offensive, and like it diminishes the actual atrocities that happened during slavery. That equating a marriage where you can open a bank account, where you can file for divorce, where you're free to leave, where you are making a conscious decision to step into it, and almost making it similar to what slavery was slavery was actually, in that You did not have to agree to it, so it was not consensual decision. You could not leave at any time that you wanted. That almost equating, trying to equate the two minimizes the actual atrocities and the actual pain and the actual realities of slavery. Yeah, but are there similarities? Are there features in marriage that are features in slavery? I mean, we cannot fully equate marriage with slavery, fully, but more so of seeing like aspects of what happened in slavery and aspects of what constitutes slave work are present. The second prompt is that marriage is a political tool used to trick women to their own oppression. And um it's important first that the clarification is done that it's not saying that romantic love is bad or that falling in love with a man you are fucking doomed. It's more so romantic love is a beautiful thing. I love the possibilities of love. Like we are deeply wired and it's our psychological and biological need for us to want a partnership, which is like beautiful, right? But like the problem is like this beautiful thing has been co-opted, it has been used, it has been taken away to serve other interests. The marketing of romance and romantic love to girls is something that we're invited to look into and how it guides our expectations on what marriages are going to be and how relationships with men are going to be like. So I do feel like to some extent the way it is marketed that it gets to effectively obscure from what the actual realities of what marriages is going to be, right? So when we look at it from the first point of a happily ever after script, right, that we've seen in movies, in comedies, in pop culture, and how the ultimate peak of a woman's experience most of the time is when the knight in shining armor, the prince charming, comes to save her. And when we look to at the glamour that is put in the milestone, the wedding in of itself, where weddings is a multi-billion industry, right? All that beautiful wedding dress, the event, the planning, the focus on the event effectively distracts from looking into what marriage is actually going to demand and ask of you. The effect of this, of course, is it causes the unwitting acceptance of the domestic labor in the home, especially for the wife, in that a woman, and I see it so many times, a woman oftentimes might enter into the marriage blinded by the romance and then find herself as the one who is default responsible for things like cooking, cleaning, and the mental load, in the household. And the excuse now becomes like because she loves him, because this is love, right? Like she is conditioned, and most women are actually conditioned to see this as a form of showing my love and not just the structural exploitation, the labor exploitation that it is. And when romance is sold like this to girls, it also causes the deprioritizing of like the financial and personal security when you're told follow your heart, follow your heart. And I feel like that's code for do something that isn't quite sound or the smartest decision, but because it's popular, I feel like sometimes it's code for that. And I feel like the sale of romance conditions women to not make calculated decisions about themselves and about their futures. Romantic love is great and it may sound good on paper, and I do agree that there are experiences, people have good experiences in it, but it is also the medium in which women get to lose their autonomy. And romantic love often with a man leads to physical and emotional devotion to them, and that kind of devotion leads to exploitation even when it's not intentional. Problem isn't romance, the problem isn't love, but rather the thing that you want most, this beautiful feeling of being with a person that is fair to yearn for, that can also be weaponized against you. The next prompt is that the good wife in patriarchy is akin to the Stockholm syndrome. meaning the good wife in patriarchy and what is propped up as being a good wife in patriarchy is similar to having the Stockholm syndrome. And it seeks to say that a traditional submissive woman in the patriarchy or in marriages, yeah, develops a psychological bond with their husband, and that women, when you find yourself married women in male dominated systems, are forced to love, are forced to defend the very systems that oppress them, i.e., marriage, right? So the Stockholm syndrome is a psychological response, right? It's more of a coping mechanism, it's not a medical diagnosis, where like a captive starts to develop positive feelings, things like empathy and love for their oppressor and their captor, right? So it seeks to help understand the reasons why married women or women defend this very system that is clearly sometimes so unfair to them. They praise these systems, they willingly participate and advocate in these systems that limits their freedom. So why is that? Why is that? And the Stockholm syndrome is, I fear, something that also gets to shed a light on the reasoning. So for the Stockholm syndrome, think of like, for instance, you get kidnapped, and the coping strategies that you would most likely adopt out of survival, seeking to appease your captor, right? Being very grateful for even things like food just so that you get to their good graces. And in the context of really, really abusive marriages, factor in abusive marriages is that you get to be isolated from your support system. So in the cases of when you are completely isolated and there's an intermittent praise, reward kind of system, it creates a system with your abuser where the person that is abusing you is also the person that you go that is giving you comfort, which is like makes it incredibly difficult for victims to leave even abusive marriages. But when you are dependent on a person for survival, you are forced to appease them. We're gonna see the coping strategies that one can adopt when they are abducted, right, or in a captor captive situation and marriages. What are the similarities? What are we seeing in both that drives us to hear about this point, right? First one is the threat to survival, that in a situation where the woman depends on the man for survival, you are naturally going to do everything in your power to stay in their good graces. The next one is the perceived kindness that happens, when you are in an abducted, situation and the captor gives you food. You might tend to be immensely grateful for that, as an effort to be like, hey, I'm harmless. Like, thank you so much. You are a good person. Similar to the dynamic that I see in most marriages of men being praised for doing what they're supposed to do, doing the barest of of minimums, and they are propped up as great dads when they say like they are going to watch. Mind you, these are their kids that they're going to watch and babysit their kids for a couple of hours to give the moms a rest. Or when women tend to praise their mans, their husbands and their men for allowing them to have a life outside of just being a mom, allowing them to have hobbies, right? And the last one that I feel really explains the defense that married women often have is that identifying with the dominant power for safety, that to reduce feelings of fear and anxiety, a captive oftentimes might strive to see the world from their captor's eyes, similar to how a good wife might try to uphold or make space for societal's view on what marriage should be in her dynamic, or adopt her husband's view, genuinely believing that women should be submissive because it's psychologically easier to agree with the power structure than try to fight it every single day. And the critic that I've seen about this is that this prompt is reducing marriage to a master slave dynamic where the husband is the oppressor and the wife gets nothing but oppression. arguing that marriage is far often more cooperative than that I get to also make sacrifices, financial sacrifices for these two. And it's unfair to just reduce this dynamic to just being about a hostage situation. It's like, to each their own. The last prompt is that marriage legalizes male ownership of the female body and erases consent. And oh, this one is so packed up. I feel like I need to look into this more and more and more and more and more. But what we see often in marriages is the weaponization of consent. That, traditional cultural interpretations of marriage transform a partnership, contract into a conjugal entitlement, right, in which women lose their bodily autonomy through things like structural, religious, and psychological coercion. We can argue that marriage can be a partnership of equals, but the lived reality of so many women is a system of implied consent in marriages, that when you say I do on the altar, that means you have waived all your rights to ever say no to any sexual activity. The lived reality of so many women, and I've seen them give their accounts on Reddit and TikTok, and it's mostly divorced women saying how it felt so disheartening to them that their husbands felt like their bodies were permanently, accessible to them. And it was hard even for me to read of cases where women are saying that they would go to change their clothes in their closets because simply undressing to change your clothes in front of them was seen as an open invitation to sex, right? Or when they could just be so happy to get to their menstruation phase, right? Because it was the only acceptable way in which you could say no to sex, right? And it is disheartening because the reality of so many women, even before you step into marriage, is that you are already sexualized, right? You are already almost seen, especially to incels and misogynistic men, that you um exist as a sexual object for them, that you exist to be a vessel for their pleasure and to get to give birth to their kids, right? So it's disheartening that marriages almost marriages can put, a sense of a stamp to that idea that now at least I get to say that your body is mine, it's permanently accessible to me, and that I see you more as this sexual being and not a human being with feelings, and sometimes give you space to be like, I am not feeling like having sex right now. There is no allowance for that in most dynamics because of the view that when you get married, your body is mine. I'm not saying this to say that it is wrong to have a sense of conjugal expectation, that when you get into marriage, then expecting, I would really love a mutually, intimate life with my partner. But the problem is when there is a sense of entitlement to it, through demanding sexual compliance through fear, guilt, manipulation, and more so the feeling of you treating your partner as this warm masturbation toy rather than a complex human being who has a whole life outside of this act that gets to influence how she feels, about it. So I'm gonna read you a quote that I saw on Reddit, right? And it said, it's not a quote, I don't know. Somebody said this. Like, if you've ever tried to put your finger up a straight guy's ass during sex, you'll know that they actually understand ongoing consent, withdrawal of consent, and sexual boundaries very well. They act confused when it's our bodies. No notes, no. And there was another video too that a creator called Unpunishable Woman also posted on her TikTok. I think I'm gonna put the TikTok on here. And she was basically saying that what is propped up as a good wife in marriage is the willingness to be able to partake in sex even when you don't want to, and especially when you don't want to, because it's a form of fulfilling your marital duty. right? And so there's an overall understanding that in marriages, women can partake in sex when they don't want to. So why is it a strange and peculiar concept to conceptualize, and understand when women talk about how in an instance, in an occasion, they've been forced to partake in sex when they didn't want to. That there's that understanding in marriages, but suddenly it's untrue when women say it outside the context. It's like, I didn't think. And coercion is simply forcing a person to do something that they did not want to do through things like fear and guilt. And so the trap is that cheating so often is weaponized to women, that if you do not have sex with me, then I'm going to cheat on you. And when they cheat, then it's the woman's fault. So we have women scared of social shame and being cheated on, having to surrender their bodily autonomy, which is like prompt, I guess, stands a little true. On that, I feel like that's the end of the investigation into the anti-marriage stance, and I hope that the episode has given you perspective, something to really ponder on, and I hope that you get to make decisions about partnership that feel like you. I hope this becomes a resource that you can always come back to whenever you need it. I'm so grateful for you, and also do let me know your thoughts on any of those prompts, on where you stand with marriage, what you disagree with about the institution, what bugs you the most. Oh, I would really, really love to hear from you. I wish you a beautiful experience of yourself in this lifetime, and I hope to really indulge you soon. Bye.